Our first speaker for this evening is Dr. Stephen Sizer. Reverend Dr. Stephen Sizer is the incumbent at Christ Church in Surrey, England. Dr. Sizer is also known internationally as an author and speaker specializing in topics relating to Christian Zionism. He is a patron of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolition in the UK, a trustee of Friends of Sabeel UK, a founding member at the Institute for the Studies of Christian Zionism, and a member of the Advisory Council of Evangelicals for Middle East Understanding and the UK Board of Reference for the Mar-Elias Educational Institute in Berlin and Galilee, which was founded by Bishop Elias Shakur. Dr. Stephen Sizer is also an active member of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Sizer will talk about Christian Zionism, and his point of departure is that Zionism cannot hold interfaith dialogue hostage forever.
Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm looking forward to our dialogue a bit later after our presentations. Underneath the Sea of Galilee, down through the Jordan Valley, right down to the Dead Sea, the Red Sea, and the Arabian Peninsula to the Horn of Africa is a fault line that over thousands of years have just devastated civilizations. But there is a visible fault line that runs through that piece of real estate, as we all well know, where three faith communities, Jews, Christians and Muslims, live in uneasy coexistence. And at times it erupts in violence, and we fear that violence will erupt again in about 2 weeks' time when the UN makes a decision on whether to recognize Palestine as a state. Why has that conflict been the longest running dispute in the hands of the United Nations? Why has Israel been the subject of more United Nations resolutions than any other country in the world? 60% of UN resolutions have impacted Israel and its interests. And why has the United States vetoed virtually every single one of them? Why is there such a close relationship between the United States and Israel? Why, when Netanyahu and Barack Obama were campaigning in their various elections, did their websites look so remarkably similar when you realize that English and Hebrew are read in a different direction? Why is there such a close relationship? And why, when America stands for freedom and democracy, does so much of the world hate America, especially the Arab world? And why does Europe and America face the threat of violent attacks because of our values, one might think? Well, the Arab-Israeli conflict is the longest-running UN dispute. It's the most frequently debated UN concern, the most pervasive religious conflict in the world, the most dangerous military conflict. Tonight, chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons are loose in the Middle East with complete lack of control. The most controversial media story, and it's been perpetuated by misguided Christians. And that's the basis of my presentation tonight. The definition of Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism views the modern state of Israel as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, thus deserving our moral, political, and theological support. Now, I'm not going to go into the various strands of Christian Zionism, but there are at least three discrete members of the same family. There are the Messianic Christian Zionists, who believe primarily in an evangelistic mission. The apocalyptic Christian Zionists, they write the books, and they are very controversial. And then there are more pragmatic Christian Zionists that focus their attention on Washington and the European community. As a movement, it can be traced back to about 1820 in Britain, but the modern manifestation of Christian Zionism can be located to the 1960s and 70s and the election of the first born-again evangelical president, Jimmy Carter, who saw the establishment of the State of Israel as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. In 1977, Menachem Begin was elected as the Prime Minister, and a coalition emerges between the Christian right and the Israeli right, which is brokered by Jerry Falwell. And for the next 50 years, Jerry Falwell becomes the leading exponent or advocate on behalf of Israel in North America. When Carter vacillated over the settlement program, Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. The evangelical right shifted its sympathies to Ronald Reagan. Jerry Falwell boasted that he could mobilize 70 million conservative Christians for Israel. John Hagee has taken over the mantle from Jerry Falwell. John Hagee is a pastor of a 20,000 member church in San Antonio, Texas. He has access to 100 million Christians worldwide on a weekly basis through TV, radio, and other forms of media. He said this recently: the sleeping giant of Christian Zionism has awakened. There are 50 million Christians standing up and applauding the state of Israel. He said, think of our future potential together. 50 million evangelicals joining in common cause with 5 million Jewish people in America. It is a match made in heaven. That is the epitome of the modern manifestation of Christian Zionism, certainly in North America. Probably 25% of Christians in America identify with this movement. Christianity Today's survey suggested that. Worldwide, it represents 5% perhaps of Christians. So it is a minority sport, but it is a very influential one, as I shall show you in a moment. Let me briefly introduce you to its theological basis. This presentation and others are available from my website and my books, so you can unpack this in a lot more detail with some outlines here or on the internet tonight if you can't sleep. We're going to look at the political consequences there, the political agenda, and then I'm going to give you the moral critique. First of all, the theological basis. Christian Zionism is predicated on an ultra-literalistic reading of the Bible. The Bible says. Verses are taken out and applied today. So, promises made to the Jewish people, to Abraham, for example, in Genesis 12, to Israel in the exile, concerning Jerusalem and the temple, are applied to today almost as if the coming of Jesus was unnecessary. The promises remain applicable to the Jewish people today. Indeed, a number of Christian Zionist writers refer to the church as a parenthesis to God's continuing purposes for the Jewish people. The second tenet of this movement is the strong belief that the Jews remain God's chosen people, and therefore the land, Eretz Israel, belongs exclusively to the Jewish people. And when we mean Eretz Israel, we mean Eretz Israel, from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. This is a map that is frequently used by Christian Zionists as well as some Jewish Zionists to indicate what they would regard as their promised land. The fourth element in this theology